All eyes were on the Senate hearing today for James Comey. And yesterday we went over in detail what was a part of his opening statement. And it's a good thing we did that because he did not give his opening statement, not the one that he submitted for the record. What he did instead was to give brief comments as to why he was given the testimony and how he felt in general about President Trump. And when I tell you James Comey did not pull any punches, it was a fascinating event, and I call it that because of how many people. It was almost like a spectator sport event. But James Comey very directly referred to President Trump as a liar. So much so, the New York Daily News headline tomorrow, the front page on tomorrow, will be an image of President Trump that you see on the back of our screen, covered with the words liar. This is because, in no equivocal terms, James Comey did not mince words. He did not beat around the bush like most journalists do, like most politicians do. And he said that President Trump lied about why he fired him, and he lied and defamed, actually was the other word. He defamed not only Jim Comey, but also the FBI in general. And so this was the beginning. This is how the hearing started. Now, with regard to some of the specifics, I said I was partly wrong on my prediction. My prediction was that Jim Comey would say nothing of any significance because he has respect for the institutions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I was wrong in that regards. Jim Comey said exactly what he felt about Donald Trump, and they, didn't mince words and revealed some things that we'll discuss. But in terms of was he going to say anything substantive to lead to the impeachment of Donald Trump in the public hearing? I can't say that he actually did that. He would not go that far, and we'll watch some of the video. He would not go far enough to say that he feels like this was obstruction, or at least he wasn't willing to say in the open hearing. There was a confidential hearing that took place shortly after that, but he was careful with what he asserted in terms of collusion, in terms of obstruction, but he was very clear that Donald Trump is a liar, and what Donald Trump requested of him vis-a-vis Michael Flynn was inappropriate enough for him to record it, and he would have reported it had he had someone to report it to. He also made that clear. He could not report it to the Attorney General because, one, the Attorney General was getting ready to recuse himself. And then he said that when he went to find someone else to report to, that those positions had not been filled. So, there's a lot of questions about why he did not take action when he felt what President Trump asked him was inappropriate. And we'll get into all of that. But let's play a couple of clips to be sure. So the first clip I want to play should, but it won't, but it should put to rest the question of whether or not Russia got involved inside of the 2016 election. This is a question being asked by the chair, Senator Burr. Senator Burr is a Republican. He is the chair of this committee. He's asking James Comey, who was appointed by a Republican, what did he believe with regard to Russia? And this is how James Comey responded.
There should be no fuzz on this whatsoever. The Russians interfered in our election during the 2016 cycle. They did it with purpose. They did it with sophistication. They did it with overwhelming technical efforts. And it was an active measures campaign driven from the top of that government. There is no fuzz on that. It's not about Republicans or Democrats. They're coming after America, which I hope we all love equally. They want to undermine our credibility in the face of the world. They think that this great experiment of ours is a threat to them, and so they're going to try to run it down and dirty it up as much as possible. That's what this is about, and they will be back because we remain, as difficult as we can be with each other, we remain that shining city on the hill, and they don't like it.
Now, there's a lot of language that James Comey uses that's very superfluous and very complimentary of America and complimentary of the FBI. And I think it's reasonable for us to take a step back and say, wait a minute, Jim, damn it, Jim, this is not all what you think it is, right? there's plenty of things that makes this shiny city on the hill problematic that we need to discuss. And his overtures with regard to the honesty and the integrity of the FBI were damn near laughable, especially for anyone who has connected to the black community. Anyone with any experience with the FBI in the past or the present. There's even here in Boston, the collusion, the outright complicity that the FBI had with one of our most notorious gangsters here, Bulger. There are plenty of stories to underscore the nefarious nature of the FBI that go beyond just J. Edgar Hoover. I just want to put it. I want to put that there because we want to be sure that even though what he's saying here is integral in making the case against Donald Trump, and even though what he's saying here really is something that I personally agree with. In the middle of his conversations was all of these accolades about the FBI that I just like, come on, Jim. Not today. No, don't try that today. But back to the substance at hand. Here's what should happen after what he said. This is where we should have been, but it's not going to happen. And I'll tell you why it's not going to happen for several reasons. It is clear that Russia had something to do in our election process, something along the lines of a hack, something along the lines of the distribution of a collection of emails that they got access to. And according to the FBI director, this went all the way to the top of the government. And this is something that they wanted to do, have done, and will do again. Now, this should lay to rest. It really should lay to rest the question over whether or not the Russia did anything in this election. But we still have a contingent of people who refused to even say that Russia got involved in our election. Now, there's a qualitative difference between saying Russia got involved in our elections and saying Russia turned our election. That's totally different. That's not what I'm asserting, and that's not what the FBI director was asserting. However, people go one step too far, and now they are saying, well, I still don't believe that Russia had anything to do with this election. Do we need to clearly define what that is? Yes. Can we clearly define what that is without an investigation? No. But to sit back and say that at this point, Republicans and Democrats alike, nonpartisan people, nonpartisan organizations, bipartisan groups have all concluded with most of our intelligence community, whom, yes, we have a serious problem with on many issues. But because I have a problem with them on issue A does not mean I have to dismiss everything they say on issues B through Z. Everyone has concluded that Russia has had something to do, got involved. There's no question about it. And we need to understand what that involvement actually was, what it entailed. And I think at this point, we should be able to say, let's let this investigation go forward. And whatever the evidence says, it says. All right, that's video number one. The second question that I want to pull up that he answered was directly in regards to Donald Trump. What did he feel Donald Trump was trying to do? What impression did Donald Trump give James Comey in the meeting that he had, in the private dinner meeting that he had? And this was his response.
I was honestly concerned that he might lie about the nature of our meeting, and so I thought it really important to document. Well, my impression, and again, it's my impression, I could always be wrong, but my common sense told me that what was going on is either he had concluded or someone had told him that you've already asked Comey to stay, and you didn't get anything for it, and that the dinner was an effort to build a relationship. In fact, he asked specifically of loyalty, and the president begins by wanting to talk about my job. So I'm sitting there thinking, wait a minute, 3 times you've already asked me to stay or talked about me staying. My common sense, again, I could be wrong, but my common sense told me what's going on here is that he's looking to get something in exchange for granting my request to stay in the job.
Now, this was in regards to the dinner meeting that they had. He was invited to the White House for dinner. He was surprised to realize that he was the only one there at the dinner with Donald Trump. And at that dinner, Donald Trump continued to ask him 2 things. 1, are you interested in keeping your job? And then 2, will you be loyal to me? Will you pledge your, essentially, would you pledge your loyalty to me? And at the beginning of that clip, he says, he explains why it was that he went immediately afterwards and began to document what he experienced. And he documented it because he felt that Donald Trump would lie about the encounter. That should be, that in itself should be like headline news. But at this point where we've come with Donald Trump, that's like just a footnote. The fact that the director of the FBI felt with confidence and was accurate. He was accurate about it, because you understand, when Donald Trump was asked about this after the fact, he said that James Comey called the meeting. In the interview, I believe it was 60 Minutes. I forgot where the interview was, but there's a video of Donald Trump asserting that it was James Comey who called the meeting, when in fact it was Donald Trump who called the meeting. And in that same interview, he said that James Comey called the meeting to ask for his job, when in fact it was Donald Trump who was asking James Comey, are you interested in keeping your job? And so the suspicions of the FBI director were spot on. He knew that Donald Trump, his character and the personality that he is, would likely have lied about the encounter. And that's why he recorded it. And then he went on to explain how he felt that this was some type of play to get a patronage type relationship, to make sure that James Comey was subordinate and beholden, not subordinate because he's already a subordinate to Donald Trump, but beholden to Donald Trump. And he spoke about how inappropriate that made him feel. This next video clip from the session today, it was an interesting one because we wondered where the leak came from. And he was asked by a senator, she asked him, you know, essentially what made Jim Comey release this to the press. Let's take a listen in.
Did you show copies of your memos to anyone outside of the Department of Justice?
Yes. The president tweeted on Friday, after I got fired, that I better hope there's not tapes. I woke up in the middle of the night on Monday night, because it didn't dawn on me originally, that there might be corroboration for our conversation. There might be a tape. And my judgment was I needed to get that out into the public square. And so I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel.
All right, so that was Senator Susan Collins asking him if he had given this memo or the series of memos to anyone. And this is where James Comey basically stated that he was the person that gave it directly to a friend of his who gave it to the New York Times. Now, this seems to have made a buzz in the conservative community because they're now they're like, oh, he released some information that was confidential. No, it wasn't confidential. He made it clear in his testimony that he recorded this memo in an unconfidential manner to give him the freedom to use that memo as he needed to. And so he was literally 3 steps ahead of Donald Trump in this regard. That's number one. He was the one to release it. Why did he release it? This is where I tweeted this morning that Donald Trump brought this hearing on himself. This entire charade, this entire encounter today was 100% the making of unforced errors by Donald Trump. And the reason I can say that with confidence is because James Comey just testified that the reason he turned over the memos to his friend, to turn it over to the media, was because Donald Trump made the thinly veiled threat saying, watch out, James Comey, because there may be tapes. You better hope that there aren't any tapes. And it was upon him saying that he realized that if there are tapes, that would make some corroborating evidence. In other words, it would no longer be a question of he said versus he said, a question of James Comey's word against Donald Trump's word, but rather it would be, here are the tapes. And the only way that he felt that those tapes could be exposed and brought to light was if he set this in motion to drive an independent counsel into the equation. And he did that by leaking the memos. And the reason you had the hearing today was because of the memos being leaked. James Comey would likely not have released the memo if Donald Trump had not gotten ahead of himself and threatened him on Twitter. So everything that happened today, as angry as some people are about how this is a dog and pony show or this is a distraction, you realize this is 100% the making of Donald Trump's ego and his arrogance. All right, so let's get to the crux of it. Two of the most important questions were these. Does James Comey think that Donald Trump tried to obstruct justice? And whether or not James Comey thought there was actual collusion with the Russians. Here's the first video. Do you think, James Comey, do you think that Donald Trump wanted to obstruct justice?
I don't think it's for me to say whether the conversation I had with the president was an effort to obstruct. I took it as a very disturbing thing, very concerning.
But when you get when a president of the United States in the Oval Office says something like "I hope" or "I suggest" or "Would you," do you take that as a directive?
Yes. Yes, it rings in my ear as kind of, will no one rid me of this meddlesome priest?
I was just going to quote that. In 1170, December 29, Henry II said, "Who will rid me of this meddlesome priest?" And then the next day he was killed.
All right, so that actually was one of my favorite parts of the entire exchange because of the reference and the fact that they were both on the same page, but I digress. It was a nerd moment for me. Here's the point. A lot of hay is trying to be made, particularly by Senator Marco Rubio, over whether or not this was a direct order or whether or not the words "I hope," and this is what James Comey recorded. He said that Donald Trump told him, "I hope that you could see your way clearly to letting Michael Flynn off the hook," essentially. I'm paraphrasing at this point, but because he prefaced it with "I hope," that somehow lessened the impact or the mandate that someone would feel when sitting in the presence of the President of the United States and hearing the President of the United States say, "I hope that you would let this go." That would be received by any normal human being as something that the President of the United States wants you to do. And yet, Republicans are trying to weasel their way out and say, "Oh, no, it wasn't a clear case of obstruction of justice because it's something that he hoped that would happen and not something that he instructed James Comey to do." And then, of course, in their reference, they were alluding to the situation where the king said, "Well, is there no," speaking to his court, said, "Is there no one here that would rid me of this meddlesome priest?" In other words, he did not have to ask his knights directly to go and rid him of this meddlesome priest. The mere fact that he spoke this and floated this was actionable enough to make it happen. And so while the Republicans are trying to dance around this, anyone with integrity and anyone who's willing to look at this in a unbiased fashion would say that the President of the United States, the most powerful man in the world, saying that this is something I hope you would do, translates into "I want you to do this." Now, whether or not that in and of itself measures up to the standard required for obstruction of justice, James Comey himself stated that's not his call to make. And in fact, none of us, all of us who are just commentators or journalists who are looking in, that's not really a call for us to make. That's a legal question, whether or not this actually amounts up to obstruction of justice. And then there becomes the political portion. Because even if it meets the legal standard, it's still incumbent upon the Republican Party, because they're in the majority, to actually do something about it. And Paul Ryan today has already indicated that if the roles were reversed, they would not be seeking impeachment. The GOP would not be interested in impeaching Donald Trump if he was a Democrat. In other words, saying that this is not an impeachable offense in their estimation, and they're trying to preempt the momentum that's moving towards impeachment. Now, I want to put this caveat here, because everything that we discuss on this show, we discuss with a level of nuance that tries to make the picture holistic. And this is why I'm including the fact that it's a legal question as well as a political question, but also it's a question that we need to slow down and pump our brakes and ask if this is what we want in the first place. Now, has everything that we've seen, does it seem like Donald Trump needs to be impeached over the Russian issue? I have no idea. But over what happened since he became the president of the United States on January 20th, and him asking James Comey to no longer investigate Michael Flynn, yes, this is absolutely something, and we've said it before, and I'll say it again. It's often not the original controversy that gets a person in trouble. It's the attempted cover-up that brings someone down. And this is a monster of Donald Trump's creation. And so whether or not you agree that that there is or is not evidence of Russian collusion, that's besides the point in this conversation. The real only conversation that needs to occur here is whether or not this is actual obstruction of justice. And if it is, that is an impeachable offense. And finally, I'll add this one last caveat to pump our brakes, because if it is an impeachable offense and you can actually get some Republicans on board to do that, is that what you really want, because you would create an environment where Michael Pence is the nice, calming, collective figure on the scene, getting legislation signed into law because the specter of Donald Trump has been kicked out. In comparison to what we have now, gridlock, not because of a divided Congress, but gridlock because of an incompetent, egotistical president who does not understand the limitations of his hubris. The last video is a real question in terms of the Russia investigation. It was a question by Senator Tom Cotton, and he wanted to know, was there collusion? And I thought it was insightful to see this response from James Comey.
Do you believe Donald Trump colluded with Russia?
It's a question I don't think I should answer in an open setting. As I said, that we didn't, when I left, we did not have an investigation focused on President Trump. But that's a question that'll be answered by the investigation, I think.
Indeed, that's a question that has to be answered, and it's not a question that he was able to answer in public. And there was quite a few questions that he could not answer in the public forum, and he had to wait to for the confidential forum. So the question is, what's next? What actually came out in the confidential forum hearing, and whether or not it amounts to enough to be actionable, and actionable enough to make the majority party, the party of the president of the United States, join with all of the Democrats in calling for the impeachment of the president. This is the last thing I'll say about it, and then we're going to move to the UK elections. Senator Burr this morning, when he was asking his line of questions, it was very direct. It's very straight to the point. He didn't ask any questions that were irrelevant to the issue at hand. He got direct to the point, and the way those questions were asked made me pause and think that this circling of the wagons by Republicans is not concrete. In other words, there may be a chink in the armor. There may be an opening for Republicans to be picked off in order to get Donald Trump impeached, not even over Russia, but over everything that Donald Trump has done subsequently to try to cover up the incident and to try to help Michael Flynn get out of an investigation by the FBI.